for being here. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, council member, for making time. And Sabrina, I know you just introduced yourself, but I think maybe one other person came in if you want to reintroduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Wright with Invest Atlanta. I lead our business retention and expansion efforts at Invest Atlanta. Of course, we're the economic development agency for the city. So, and I'm just here representing with Invest Atlanta and participating with Alan, who will be on, if he's not on already, I don't see his name yet.
Thank you, Sabrina. And y'all know me, your friendly neighborhood community engagement manager, like Spider-Man, but the Spider-Girl of the Beltline in this process. Thank you all for making time this evening to be here for our third Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting for Murphy Crossing. We will jump right into the conversation. Everything has been rolling so fast, so I can't tell you again how much we appreciate everybody's attentiveness during these meetings and out of these meetings, holding us accountable by sending emails, asking questions. I sent an email early this morning. Murphy was the first thing on my mind with the agenda. And I just want to go over it for everybody to be on the same page. But the agenda for tonight is really a conversational and working sort of agenda. First, we'll start by reviewing just how we got here with the RFP, what the RFP will be composed of. And the agenda is on the left-hand side of the screen pretty much. So we're here at the welcomes. We'll go into what sort of the outline of the RFP looks like. We'll get your feedback and really have an open conversation and dialogue where you can get off mute and go ahead and give your feedback. We'll capture your feedback in note-taking format on the screen as we go through the conversation. And we're really going to focus on two areas of the RFP tonight because it's a lengthy document. Whenever this RFP is released, it's like 50-something pages. So it's going to be hard to really dive into that all in one meeting. So our intention was to break it up into chunks. And then before we get out, we'll talk about what our next steps look like so you can kind of plan moving forward what our conversations will look like. And then we'll take any other questions and comments at that time. And to ground us, every meeting, public and stakeholder, we want to establish the intention, the purpose, and the outcomes of why we are all taking time here right now. So the intention of us being here is to establish an equitable community engagement process that creates trust and transparency surrounding communities and stakeholders throughout this process. And the purpose and outcomes that we're looking for is to forge mutual trust, two-way street and communication between Atlanta Beltline and all of the adjacent neighborhoods to 1050 Murphy, and develop a request for proposal for the Murphy Crossing RFP. And that reflects community input that we're gathering now and for the next few weeks throughout a series of public meetings and stakeholder meetings that we're engaging in right now. So that is why we are all here, moving toward an equitable development process of this RFP for 1050 Murphy. And so if you haven't worked on an RFP before, me being one of those people, it's pretty prudent that we just establish what goes into an RFP. So a request for proposals for folks in the development field to work on this site, to develop this site. What goes into this request for proposal that they will be responding to is something that was done from day one, the community survey. So the community survey that has been open for several weeks now will actually be just an addendum that goes into this RFP. And then you have the previous scope of work that was done in 2018. We're not going to start from scratch on this new RFP. We're actually going to pull that scope of work from 2018 and look at what we'll keep and what we need to rework. And then, of course, this engagement process is how we're funneling all of the feedback from the different stakeholder groups, community resident into what will be our draft RFP at the end of this process. And so even with those main things, there are some additional inputs into the process, like demographic information, like market conditions. We talked about a lot of this. It was a lot of heavy information that we talked about in the first few meetings. And that wasn't even all of the information that goes into this. But all of those considerations go into this RFP. And Beth, can you walk us through the components, the outline of what we're looking at for this draft RFP?
So Whitney started talking about what the RFP is, that request for proposals. And so we took a look at what the project scope. So we are here working on what would be the work product or the development plan that would be proposed by responders to the RFP. And it has several components to it. And amongst those components for the RFP that developers will have to prepare a response to, there will be employment development and job creation. Job creation is an important aspect of this RFP proposal and responses that come back. They will have to address economic development, housing, green space, and that's meaningful green space that connects the trail to the that connects the corridor to the project. If you could go back one slide, please. There will be a section for project uses and site development. So what does this project look like? What will it be composed of? Will it have apartments? Will it have condominiums? What kind of office space? What kind of other workspaces will be included? There will be a section that developers will address with regard to arts and culture, community engagement, and equitable implementation. So tonight, we're going to focus on the first two bullets under the project components that will be included in the 2020 RFP project development scope. Now, let me start by saying this is ABI's, and I had to go back and rack my brain. This is ABI's first attempt at having an equitable and inclusive development project. Because since our Chief Equity Officer has been with us a little over a year now, maybe, we have refocused the work that Atlanta Beltline does to ensure that there is equity and inclusivity in everything that we do. So for the first, and this is how this process is going to move forward tonight. I'm going to open up the conversation on, let's take the topic on the screen, employment development and job creation. What you see on the screen in front of you are subcomponents of that, which are essential, if you will, to class this project as equitable and inclusive. And they include living wage job opportunities, career track job opportunities, construction jobs for Beltline residents, permanent jobs for Beltline residents. And then following the discussion of these items, we want to know from you, from your survey, from just thinking off of the top of your head, because you know this community, what else would be important to the surrounding communities with regard to employment development and job creation? So I'm going to open up the mics and let's find a way to be one at a time in getting your opinions out there. I think we're going to have a Google document to open up, and we're going to take your comments from the persons that are gathered here tonight as we discuss employment development and job creation. Given the bullets that were there, what's important for equity and inclusion, what kinds of jobs would be important to the community to see at Murphy Crossing?
Kim's hand was up. Kim, if you want to unmute.
All right, thank you guys, and I apologize for being a little late. My name is Kimberly Scott, Chair of Neighborhood Planning Unit T. I have a question before, Beth, I know you wanted to start with the bullets, but can we get an idea of the funding for this project? Is Invest Atlanta on the line? Because, you know, the way it typically works is that I really don't care what the neighborhood wants. Unfortunately, if the money dictates otherwise, i.e. the funding source and what's attached to it, these meetings are all for naught. So, you know, I really would like to understand from Invest Atlanta or Beltline, if someone could really tell us what are the funding sources for the project, and what's the goal going forward with those funding sources in putting this RFP out.
I'm gonna jump on this first, and then whoever else is out there from ABI, or if Invest Atlanta wants to chime in. So this is a request for proposals. What we are doing is asking developers to take a look at the site, take a look at the surrounding area, what's going on, and make a project. And when you make that project, how much are you willing to purchase the Murphy Crossing 20 acres or so from ABI for? So this is a proposed sale of the property to a developer to develop a project. As far as I would know, there wouldn't be any restrictions other than what is included in the RFP, what they could get zoned through the city of Atlanta, and what the community engagement process within a normal city zoning process would deliver for them.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Not really.
Okay, but maybe I don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
Okay, so is Invest Atlanta on the board? I mean, on the call? Because I think who is funding the project? Is it Beltline? Is it Invest Atlanta / City of Atlanta? Like, who are the funders?
Do you mean for this engagement process?
Yes, for the engagement process as well as for the project overall.
Yeah, this is Dwayne Vaughn with Atlanta Beltline.
Okay.
What normally happens is, as part of this RFP process, the developer will give us their sources and uses. And so the funding will come from a combination usually of private funds that the developer brings from banks or from other financial institutions. They will also let us know whether or not they plan to use tax-exempt bonds or they would like subsidy from some of the public entities. And if they do, we'd like to understand what that exactly looks like. But the preference will be that they bring a capital or monetary stack of monies that shows us exactly where it will come from. So it's not enough for them to say $5 million will come from a bank. We'll want to know what bank has given some preliminary indication that they will fund this. So this is really going to be developer-driven, developer-funded. Invest Atlanta, Atlanta Beltline, Atlanta Housing, all of these others might provide some subsidy, and I put that might in quotes, but we really want the developer to bring all of their resources to bear and show us exactly what those are in concrete kinds of terms. Does that help supplement the answer that Beth gave you?
Yeah, so it sounds like we're making recommendations on an RFP and basically giving that RFP to a developer with conditions. and expecting that developer to then price it out with the conditions in place. The conditions being employment development, affordable housing, I mean, whatever, you know, those conditions are. And then we're hoping that he is able to solidify subsidies or tax credits or whatever he is wanting to do to help pay for what is in the RFP.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Nick,
Okay.
did you have a supplemental comment?
No, I had a bullet point.
Okay, let's go. And see, that's why I'm not in economic development. I didn't answer Kim's question, so I'm glad someone could answer your question.
So in terms of what we have here, you know, living wage job opportunities, career track job opportunities, et cetera, that's all very nice, but it's going to be hard, I think, for a developer to promise any particular job opportunity when you don't know if you're creating a space, but you don't necessarily know who's going to occupy that space in order to provide those job opportunities. So I'm in terms of, you know, things that are also important to me, I think that if we were able to have job training programs that are paid and felony record expungement, opportunities, the types of things that will help people on ramp into whatever job opportunities are created by this space. That would be something that you know, we could do regardless of who the tenant might be.
Okay. Are there other items that that you would like to see with regard to employment development and job creation? Do we need to expound on these bullets anymore? Can you help us with that? And again, what else would be important to your community? Think about the survey that you took, and if any of the comments or questions in the survey are relevant to this particular bullet point, because we're trying to give place for the survey that was community driven to drop their bullets into this language.
Jay, do you have a second? Or I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, well, Jay, or excuse me, Lawrence, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be a definition. What is living wage? There may be a common accepted definition federally at $15 an hour, but what does that mean for here in Atlanta? Career track opportunities, what's a career track? With respect to requiring a developer to include it in their response to the RFP. What does construction jobs mean? Many construction jobs are temporary, especially if the developer is somebody from out of state. They may be hiring a local construction company, but does this mean that there will be, subsidies given to the construction company to ensure that these employees that live along the Beltline can maintain these jobs after this particular project is done, or will it be based on just the timeline of this project? What does permanent jobs mean? Define permanent jobs. And what else is important is really simple. There's no way of knowing what else is important until the previous stuff has already been clearly defined and understood, so that the developer, and I'm thinking of with the concept of this is input to the RFP, informing the RFP, and not something that a developer has to do. But if any of this is done, how is it going to be weighted compared to other parts of the RFP?
I'll jump in really quick, and really, I think, Dwayne, this is probably an appropriate place for you to come in. But in the RFP, there's a definition section, right? So that definitely is a consideration. I think for the purposes of our activity today, and maybe we should identify what our definitions are, but our idea was to get what's important to you all to identify in those definitions. Dwayne, do you want to jump in on what some of these things are defined as?
Yeah, I think the way you explained it is correct, because we didn't want to have definitions that did not capture some of the things that the community wanted to make sure was there. So we would start with a definition for living wage, for example, at the $15 an hour, but we would also look at what experts in this field say the living wage should be here in Atlanta. So I think we've captured that we need clear definitions of all of these terms.
And just to say, Kara here, exactly to your point, Jay Lawrence, is pulling out the construction jobs separately, because that would be a temporary opportunity. But even though it's temporary, we want to ensure that those go to residents near the project, right? So having that separated from the permanent jobs requirement. So, and if y'all, we'd love to hear too, kind of maybe even percentages, or, what is your initial thoughts around some of these set asides for the local community? Do we look at all Beltline residents? What are some of your thoughts around the geography we should be looking at?
I'd like to add
This is
something.
Randy. Just wanted to jump in, and Kara spoke to a little bit of what I was about to ask. Is there a way to limit the geography to the 30310 neighborhoods, or that particular zip code? And then with respect to living wage, for permanent jobs and for even temporary jobs, are we including things like health benefits, and medical benefits, dental and such like that, insurance? Are those things included in that whole concept of I can't even see it, living wage jobs and any other benefits? Is that what we're thinking of? And then, I think to Nick's point earlier, these are very good as, excuse me, as descriptors, but at the same time, knowing exactly what the employer is going to be, or the job center is going to be, I think that'd be very interesting as well. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm rambling a little bit, and it goes back to Nick's point with respect to workforce development. It'd be great to see some sort of partnership with a job trainer or skills trainer, so that folks can either upskill or get the required certifications that they need, so that their experience, whether it be temporary or permanent, has some transferability to another job or career once this particular opportunity expires. So those are my input at least at the moment.
Whitney, I think Councilmember Shepherd was trying to, I saw her waving on my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to get some clarity too. And, as a council member, we've been down this road before. It sounds like some other workshops we've been in. And some Pittsburgh Yard went through some of the same things, where C.D. Mooney was the contractor, and a part of his contract in terms of getting the contract was that he was required, as a part of his contract and his bidding and getting it, was that he would hire residents from the community, and they created a whole program around how they actually went in and actually sent folks to him to hire. Specifically, there was all kind of information out on their project saying, please come in and apply for the jobs. I would also say, because Invest Atlanta and the Beltline is involved in this, and I don't know if people know, but I will be talking to Eloisa. We're in the process of completely revamping the Atlanta workforce, merging it with Invest Atlanta. And one of the things that I just was on a meeting 2 days ago on was actually literally talking about how do we hire people in our communities. The Beltline, this particular project, since the Beltline is under the umbrella of Invest Atlanta, is a typical project that we really would actually market this out in the community, specifically around finding people jobs in our own specific communities. It could be 30310. I would tell you, sometimes even 30310, we send people, but we got to get them trained, get them qualified up. But the point would be that the developer who's coming, we giving all this to him as criteria, he or she, I heard some people say he, also she, could be a she, as criterias for this is what we're looking for. And so as a part of that, these are the things we're going to be asking for, that you hire folks on jobs.
You went on mute, Councilmember Shepherd.
That when the developer is doing their construction, that they will literally be hiring folks from the community to do their construction. I believe that's what we're talking about. So that's short term. But then in terms of whoever they're bringing in as a developer, also saying to them that, listen, when you are actually hiring permanent in terms of what you're developing out, is that we expect from people in the community to be hired as a part of your development. So always short term in terms of construction, when the folks are building it out, that's short term in terms of construction. And then long term is really looking at what are you going to build out, Mr. Developer, Mr. Mrs. Developer, what are you going to build out long term? What are the jobs coming with that long term development? How can we prepare for that now and get our people trained? So when that happens, we can send people to you. And I would see that as going through workforce development or something like that and Invest Atlanta. But that's just my thoughts on that. In terms of what y'all are talking about, Beth, y'all correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
No, Commissioner, Councilwoman, I think you hit the nail on the head. I know that the city has a first source jobs program, and a lot of times crews come in with their, contractors come in with their crews intact. So requiring them to hire a certain number of workers from the neighborhood could be an advantage for Murphy and this development.
You asked for percentages. This is Lawrence. You asked for percentages. I'd say.
You went on mute, Lawrence. I don't know what's happening.
Okay. You asked for percentages. I would say that at a minimum 10%, because you're right, they will bring their own teams in, but these are folks who can be trained and be part of their workforce development piece as well, if the percentage is no less than 10 of total workforce, including management.
Absolutely. Right. I had my hand up, but I actually put it in the chat. This is Kim again. Yeah, we need to make sure we specify with that the difference between our, and I don't want to say blue collar, but I did put that in there, you know, just our guys that are actually out in the field, but make sure that we have an equal amount or percentage of workforce for our management as well. And we can specify that in the RFP without it, you know, having any legal repercussions. And then also local workforce hiring within 2 miles of the project location. I think Randy touched 30310, but just to really kind of hone in on hiring within the area.
Hey, so this is Nick Hesse. I have a couple more points. I pulled up the community survey, and on the issues for the CBA, you know, we get into hiring issues pretty soon on. It's the 4th highest item is preferred local hiring, but I would also show that in the 6th and 7th, they talk about preferred local business ownership, preferred minority business ownership. So we shouldn't just also talk about jobs, but we should also talk about the opportunity of entrepreneurs within the community to start their own businesses within the development. You know, so I think that yes, go ahead.
So Nick, I have a question for you. So what I hear you saying is that the developers should provide opportunities for local businesses to be located on the site.
And that's on our next slide.
Okay, so Kara's gonna cover that. So I'll hold my comment till we get to your bullet then, Kara, okay? All right, so what kind of jobs are we, go ahead, Nick, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I also want to point out that when you start talking about construction jobs, we often say, you know, well, these are temporary. My dad was in construction for 26 years. And one of the first things that happens in the construction site, thank God, they're union, right? So there's a partnership waiting there for good jobs with benefits and training and the ability to actually, you know, turn construction into something, not just, you know, digging a ditch, but, you know, but becoming a carpenter, an electrician, you know, any of these type of tradesperson. So, you know, we shouldn't just sort of say, yeah, you know, construction jobs are a good pathway, can be a very good pathway into the middle class. And I will also say, although I myself was like, okay, we want to talk about job training and felony expungement and these types of things. They scored kind of low on the community survey, but last point, I have not yet filtered out all of the results. That was asked yesterday or I believe, to provide a version of this that filters out only the results from people who are within the immediate impact area, and that might change the ordering of these things. I'll have that data in another day or two.
And Nick, just to say, Kara here, I don't think it's to diminish those construction job opportunities, but it's just to ensure that we're making sure there's set asides for both types of jobs, the jobs
Absolutely.
that'll be there from the construction. And that's a good point too. Is there a way to tie the construction workers into those those permanent jobs? So is there a way that then they transition into like facility maintenance on behalf of the owner or the property manager? So I think that's a great point too. Those are skills that can be used as a career pathway. So that's what we're talking about with the career pathway language.
Right.
Also, this is Tavius Elder. I'd like to also see some consideration for 1099 workers or gig workers also, if that has been considered. Hi.
Great point. Great point.
Lawrence, did you want to jump back in?
Yes, thank you. I heard the word a couple of times of opportunities, and I've had issues in the past with that unless there are verification in place. The fact that a developer or any business entity who might possibly be receiving public funds especially says they provide an opportunity for people to open up shops or do whatever, or even provide jobs, but there's no way to verify it. So you end up taking their word for something that they may not have done. Anything that's an opportunity should have some sort of verification process in it. I don't know how that would be written in an RFP for something this large, but you know, I don't know if there's a site manager, you know, that would be over this as it's going on, but that would be an issue if you can't verify that the positions are actually available, or if it's like being in this process that we're in right now. No one folks who don't have access to a computer simply are left out. And it may be that they're providing opportunities, but only to those who have access, and those who have the ability but don't have access never even find out about it.
Okay, this is Winfrey. Can everybody hear me? Because my computer's you can't see me because my computer's acting up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let me speak to the Moody situation. I was on both sides of the Pittsburgh Yard project, from everything happening at Pittsburgh Yard and then to the outside, to trying to get people from the community jobs on the site. We actually created a agency to help people fill out the paperwork and to get jobs on the site. The problem was that, like Nick said and Lawrence has touched on, a lot of the people had they could not pass. They had to have a drug test to work on the Moody site because of workman comp issues and all kinds of insurance issues. And a lot of the people in the Pittsburgh community that wanted those jobs did not pass the drug test. So what Moody and their company did was they hired people from outside of the community that had come through our agency, but they were high level workers. They were master carpenters and master electricians, but they called themselves hiring from Pittsburgh because they went through our agency. I think that there needs to be some kind of stopgaps in there to make sure that people from the community are able to get those jobs, and that, you know, those stringent criteria need to be a little bit relaxed on the people that they're trying to get from the community.
I agree. It's such a game changer, life changer for people gets that opportunity.
Okay, are there other items that we have missed or you would like to see included? If not, we can move to the next.
And perhaps before we go on, I just want to make sure that we've captured what the conversation has been as accurately as possible. So conversation between the chat and live, and I'm going to do my best to summarize, but started with definitions. So what are all of the definitions of all of ABI's main priorities? And let's see, Lawrence, you had something else to say about these definitions.
It might be below Whitney. Maybe not, okay.
Okay. And Ayana in the chat, and you wrote this verbatim, so maybe I don't actually have to go through yours, but for the benefit of the group, all in a loud place. Yes, we got that, you're in a loud place. Thinking of what we've seen in Westview and also what we've learned at the blank where you're doing workforce. Okay, I'm trying to read what you wrote, but Ayana, I'm gonna say that you've captured it well because you typed it all in the chat. Randy, you were talking about specifically when it comes to some of these priorities of job opportunities, so on and so forth, targeting to specific zip codes, and that's how we've gotten to this conversation about Pittsburgh and Moody. But defining that living wage, does it include benefits? And making sure that we have partnerships with organizations that are helping people to continue to exceed or excel and progress.
Well, Whitney, I just want to add one piece in there, and that's certification. And so it's one thing to train them up, but if they have some sort of certification that they can take with them to the next job site or what have you, I think that will be one way of ensuring that their construction experience is not just a short-term gig, but a long-term career.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Thank
Offering
you.
opportunities for certifications.
Correct.
Okay, great addition. Councilmember Shepherd was talking about again, Moody Construction and what's going on at Pittsburgh, but in specifically working with Invest Atlanta and Eloisa on the workforce development end, kind of going back and tying in with what Randy was saying. Okay, and making sure the market, that there's a match between what trained positions are needed and maybe offering some training to make sure the market matches the need. Did I understand that correctly? And making sure the developer understands that local residents must have the hiring preference. Kim, going back to the local workforce hiring within 2-mile radius, so that kind of goes back into Randy's suggestion of 30310 as multiple zip codes, so you suggested 2 miles. Partnering with Workforce Atlanta for blue collar and white collar. That goes back to Jay Lawrence's suggestion of making sure there's positions in management and also the blue collar team. Making sure that there's DBE opportunities are mandatory. oh, you were making a statement that they are mandatory with city funds as well. Is what's JV opportunities? Kim?
Joint venture.
Joint venture.
And Lawrence, to make sure, underline, there is verification throughout all of these processes and suggestions that we're making. And Nick, thank you for highlighting some of the community feedback from the survey about CBAs. One of the four highest, I guess, voted or prioritized item was local hiring, 6 and 7 being minority business ownership, and that construction jobs aren't necessarily temporary, but really can, kind of like other people were saying, provide a career path for people into the middle class. Randy going back to say that there should be opportunities for subcontractors to be hired. Tavia's making sure that we consider 1099 workers in this scope as well. And Tavius, if you want to think about how to elaborate that, I would be curious to hear your thoughts on it. And Ayana, because you were in the comments, I'm not gonna repeat it all because we're gonna assume that you captured it. Jay, anything that is an opportunity, we kind of talked about this before, needs to be verified. I think me and Will typed at the same time. And Winfrey, going back to Moody Construction as an example, that there needs to be some sort of stopgap for when people are being hired from outside of the neighborhood because the people inside of the neighborhood don't meet the requirements for different reasons. Ayana, what is CEFGA, train workers?
It's SEFCA. It's the construction workforce training group, and we are already talking with them in partnership with ABP. So that's a great mention, Ayana.
Got it. And a lot of local partnerships and local to the site too, Village, Market, ATL, Gathering Spot, Connect. Last thing, would recommend considering youth pathways, specifically apprenticeship, United Way working on that right now. Also, APS has a new career academy. Atlanta Communities for Progress is partnering with them, and Atlanta Tech for that. Okay, great. I think we've captured, and I didn't mention before, but let you know now that we are recording this meeting. We didn't initially record the other meetings, but because we're having this conversation where we will really need to capture the dialogue accurately, we are recording.
Wendy, I have a quick question. This is Lynette with the Beltline, and this is for Winfrey. I'm just curious, Winfrey, when you talked about what was experienced in Pittsburgh with the Moody group, were there any other obstacles that in this process we should be aware of? Like you said, and there were some instances where you said drug testing was a problem. Were there any other obstacles you felt like the community ran into that we should be aware of as it relates to job hiring, or was that the example you gave the primary obstacle?
I think Nick or Lawrence touched on getting the information out to the people who do need jobs. Lynette, they're standing on the corners. I mean, they were sitting in the park. So they do not have access to computers. They're not sitting somewhere job searching, but they are in the communities and they do need those jobs. And they were willing to do the job. So what Moody did was he took some of the people and gave them, you know, the flagger job or the sweep up job or the assisting with the landscaper's job. But when it came to job skills that might take them to a different level, they just did not qualify for those. So the job training would be very, very important to not only this Murphy Crossing, but for something on, you know, years from now, that they could get training and that it could kick off from this project.
Thank you for that.
And one other thing to note, I think Winfrey's so right. Who is selected as that general contractor is really critical to ensuring that adequate training, creative thinking around how the developer is going to be able to engage the targeted population for these workforce training programs. So I think, Winfrey, you're right on with that. And I think that really comes into play with who's selected as the general contractor. So there might be some language we need to put around that as well. It sounds like that's important to everyone.
And this is where possibly a 1099 on this level, on this with the construction site, could come into play. Whereas, for instance, if you just got a person that you that needs works for a day, you can give them a 1099. So it may sound crazy, but it makes sense to me. So and that's on for the future and throughout the rest of the project. Of course, you can have 1099 workers that in the arts and in labor. So that's just my thinking on it. Because again, they're standing on the corner and they can't qualify. They don't have training. So you can give them work, and if you want, if it's just sweeping up or flagging, uh, that can qualify to give them a 1099. So.
So I have a question. Have we captured here most of the community partners that are doing job training? Because what we would want to do is to be able to offer suggestions in the RFP where the developer could go and collaborate and contract with a provider of workforce development to do the work, the training for people that they would need to hire to do this construction. So I know we have Workforce Atlanta, and I saw the group over in at Westside Works. I did see that. And I believe Atlanta Area Tech has a job skills training program. Are there other groups out there that do this kind of work?
I threw in the comment, Georgia Stand Up has a program, Trade Up.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we have the information when we go back to write the RFP language.
And Beth, those are the partners that we're working with every day. I was on a call with Atlanta Tech today, and they have put forward a preliminary commitment to helping us with, working with developers or doing a Q&A with developers. So anything we need from these partners, they're, ready to serve.
Well, that is great.
Yeah, and I'd say, Beth, this is Rodney, the Senior Housing Policy and Development Manager. I'm new to the Beltline, but I see a fair amount of familiar faces in here. So, hey, Nick, hey, Ayan, hey, Councilmember Shepherd. Really quick, I think, Beth, you make an excellent point in the sense of partnerships and making sure that developers who are coming to the table exhibit a level of understanding about the capacity for other service providers who may come from the community, who need to come from the community, that have the type of connections, the resources, and may need this opportunity to expand their capacity to meet the needs of their community because they come from that community. And so I think there's an excellent opportunity to build those types of partnerships, to leverage folks that are already on the ground. And I think that's part of one of the components. I don't necessarily know whether or not we'll get to it tonight, but in terms of implementation, that is one of the aspects of this RFP that is up for discussion, maybe not tonight, but should keep in the back of your mind.
Okay.
And let me add to that too, Beth, on you all. I think it's really relevant that in terms of all these things that we're putting in, that as we look at the RFP, that once we choose a developer, that we're prepared to send them to an agency who can, if we put these criteria on them, then we need to be prepared also to say, well, where do I go to begin to work with these agencies? So as we're having this discussion, our RFP, we need to be working with Resource Atlanta, Westside, all these agencies to begin to have some collaboration with them on the front end so that as soon as we find a developer, they can begin to go there, because one of the things I found in terms of working some projects, they don't have time to drag on these projects. They don't have time. If you don't have your stuff together, case in point of that was when we built out Porsche, there was a commitment, but we didn't have Worksource Atlanta wasn't together enough to make it happen, so we didn't hire a lot of folks. So if we're gonna do this, we need to make sure we're working immediately to be coming up with a plan of how to connect the developer to these agencies, and that the agencies are ready to go in terms of working that. What's the everything, begin to understand what the criterias are so that the workforce folks can begin to get people trained up in terms of that skill set, everything. Because it's really a bad flaw when you commit to these things with these folks and you say, I sent people there and we couldn't get anybody. They weren't qualified. They weren't ready. They didn't send anybody to me. So
Right.
it's a coordinated effort. It really has to be a coordinated effort.
Absolutely. Andy, you were trying to say something?
This is Randy. I don't know if you just sent it my way, but I think to Councilwoman Shepherd's point, you know, and it goes back to the conversation that we had earlier this week, Ms. Beth, with respect to allowing community engagement during the RFP process, because I know myself, and I'm sure Kim Scott, she could speak to this as well. You know, we know a number of contractors in our communities, subcontractors, electricians, plumbers, so on and so forth, that if someone were to come and say, hey, we see there is a requirement in the RFP, but we don't know anyone who works in your neighborhood, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know anyone who could fill these roles. Can you help us with that? But if we can't talk to them and say, you know, we have an electrician down the street who can do all your interiors, we have someone else who can do such and such, you know, that we would not want to preclude that developer from doing their due diligence to be disqualified. We won't want them to be disqualified. So, you know, unless we muster up some sort of list of all the construction related professionals within our communities right now, and then offer that up to ABI as an interim stopgap, what have you, or do as Councilwoman Shepherd said, and just get a whole bunch of people trained up right now and have a pool of tradespersons ready for this development but I mean, we're a long way from that period. So I don't want to be long-winded, but my point is, you know, as proposals come in or developers come in to create their proposals, they may want to ask questions relevant to the RFP of the community, and it would help them to make allowances for that communication with the community if we could be of resource.
Yes, Randy, thank you for that. And I would also offer up that once the RFP is published, it will have a date for a pre-bid conference. That is when anyone who is interested in bidding on the project would come into ABI and be able to ask questions about the proposal that is on the street. It would be a good thing to direct the community contractors that you guys are aware of to attend those meetings so that we can introduce minority contractors to the people who will be or who at least have the intention of responding to the RFP if they attended the pre-bid conference. So it would serve as a matchmaking opportunity for those developers who may or may not be aware of community folk who could do these kinds of jobs. So I think that that is something that we could prepare to offer as well.
Jay, did we talk over, and Jay Lawrence, I keep, you know, mixing your names, but did we cover what you wanted to say?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay, I'm gonna go back over to the presentation, and staff is still taking notes in the background too. So we're capturing what you're saying. I'm just switching screens. And Kara, you talked a little bit about these points throughout our conversation. Do you want to go ahead and walk us through these points on the economic development focus of the RFP?
Yes. So as Beth mentioned, we just talked through kind of that section that would be around employee development and job creation. And so Whitney, if you'll go to the next slide, the other category that we wanted to just give you guys some time to really give us some feedback, get into the weeds a little bit on, is around some of the economic development pieces that would be a part of the RFP. And so what we have here listed for your review and for your feedback that matter to us and have been in some of your surveys as well is dedicated space for local businesses and entrepreneurs, locally focused commercial amenities for Beltline residents. And so commercial amenities, but with a focus on local businesses to be providing those amenities. Catalytic redevelopment plan that supports density for future economic development growth. So as we all know, we have to have the number of new residents to support the development. And we've talked about kind of the push and pull of that. And then job creating uses geared towards living wage jobs. So to Nick's point just a minute ago, he talked about, so how are we asking them to provide living wage job? Well, it's by the uses, right? So if they build spaces for certain types of businesses, that dictates what kind of jobs will be there. So we do need to think with you guys a little bit about what types of requirements or what percentages or what things should we be thinking of or asking of the developers around uses that drive the types of jobs or amenities that we want to see at the site. And then what else is important to you? So those are the leading bullet points into our next section.
Hey, Kara, this is Randy. So can you, Whitney, can you take it to the other screen?
I think she's going to put it on. Whitney, are you going to put them on the?
They're already on there. Google
Doc. There you go, Randy.
Okay, appreciate it. So I got a couple questions with respect to this. That locally focused commercial amenities for Beltline residents, I assume that's retail, and I also assume Beltline residents means some of the neighboring folks versus residents on the Beltline on the east side.
So you want to know how local we are talking about?
I want to know, one, if commercial amenities mean retail amenities, and if Beltline residents mean West Side Trail Beltline residents, or, and I'll say it this way, and we don't have a main street, we don't have a lot of, dry cleaners and pharmacies and, just main street type of activities. And so I think that's what that bullet point is trying to get to. What we would like to see on this side is retail that supports the communities on this side versus it being more of a destination or an attraction for other people from all over the city to come and patronize or visit. So that's kind of the thought process with some of the feedback that we've received in multiple surveys. And then that there's another point that I'd like to make, which is that of, if the level of it goes to the timeline of the investment, because if the level of investment is extraordinary, then the developer has to receive an extraordinary return, and that return may not be affordable or of the taste of the community as it currently exists. And so I wonder if there's any sort of language that could speak to an incremental development approach, whereby it is incrementally activated, incrementally invested, but in a manner that is still a positive support for the local community as it currently exists. And then as it grows over time, it can keep up with the changing demographics as it changes over time. And so it's an incremental development approach that I think would be helpful for ensuring that whatever happens at Murphy's Crossing isn't an outright, isn't an immediate gentrifying force, but it is allowed to change over time as the community does. And I'll shut up. Thank you.
Oh, don't, please. You're here to be heard, man.
When you say all that you have to say, you shut up.
Nick,
Oh,
could
there
you
is
talk,
that.
this is Lawrence. Nick, could you talk to what we've heard in the survey?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I am like gunning for this one. So I see, so to the point of that the way that we shape the space helps to dictate the types of things, and comes in is a strong one, very strong. And so I will say that in for land use purposes, the strongest winner was restaurants and dining, and then shortly after that, retail. Both of these are the types of jobs that can definitely hire people who don't necessarily have a 4-year degree, right? And furthermore, when we start getting into the weeds of what types of restaurants, what types of groceries, what types of retail, farmers markets was top for groceries, followed by small neighborhood groceries. Medium, and in terms of restaurants, medium, low to moderate price restaurants, food halls, and bars and drinking places. So once again, we're sort of talking about the types of small scale jobs, that doesn't, more local jobs, and types of things that can on-ramp. Similarly, retail, local small businesses, vendors and indie market spaces, and boutiques. Those are the 3 top winners in terms of retail options. So so I think that, yeah, we can sort of go in that direction. We can definitely show support for maybe instead of fewer bigger spaces is more smaller spaces, a variety. And that also hopefully gives us the ability to sort of stabilize as interests change, as the economy moves in one direction or another direction. You don't have a situation where you necessarily lose a single anchor tenant and then everything goes to hell. And to finish off and to draft behind what Randy was saying about reusability, the top winners in terms of the CBA issues were all about adaptability, reuse, and preservation. So that's that's another good thing to keep in mind. It's like, yes, we want something that's going to be here for the long term. It's going to stick with us and offer sort of a variety. I'm seeing a desire for a variety of offerings that can be created, sustained, shared, and used by the local community. Da, 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 da.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
I'm sorry, Beth. I actually forgot what the subject area is. Could you go back to the bullet points that this part was about?
Dedicating space for local businesses and entrepreneurs, locally focused commercial amenities for Beltline residents, catalytic redevelopment plan, supporting density for future economic growth, which is a whole mouthful that Kara elaborated on, and job creating uses geared towards living wage jobs. And we talked a lot about jobs, but really we're focused on the uses. What's the uses that creates that environment for the jobs?
And let me say, if I might add that plan to support density, that includes residential density as well as commercial density. We would need both of those located at this site in order to make it be the sustainable site that I keep hearing you guys bring up. So that's my thought there.
So this is a piece that came out of the survey that the Murphy Coalition did that is contrary to what's going to be required in this. And I think this is really important that the council members on here too to hear it. And that is that from the respondents, and we're not sure who the respondents are because we didn't collect demographic data. It was very clear that the request for density is low density rather than high density. We understand that it must be high density, and I've said this before, and I'll probably repeat this until this process is done, but there is an educational component that exists here, and an educational opportunity that exists here. Because density, we recognize, all of us who are on the stakeholders group and many more understand how important density is going to be to this project, both commercial and residential. But that means that because of the way the respondents answered the survey, that density is something that they just clearly did not want. It was among the lowest weighted values. Well, it's high weighted, but the lowest requested value on the survey.
The most negative, yes, perhaps
Yes.
the single most negative reaction, of any of them. Yes.
So this is again an opportunity to ensure that that the folks who live around it, the neighborhoods that are most closely impacted by this particular development, that there be a number of flyers sent out between now and the time that the development actually happens, that there be something on TV, that the community engagement teams work together with the council members and with other vested folks to understand, so it can be explained how important density is, because that leads right into what affordable. I know this isn't a part about affordable housing, but it leads directly into what affordable housing is going to mean when you talk density. And I have to bring up, I'm the one who brings up the uncomfortable subjects, but it appears that from my white neighbors, the low density is brought in from a suburban mindset. And from many of the Black neighbors who have lived here for decades, high density is interpreted as projects. So again, it is an educational opportunity that exists here that should probably be jumped on as quickly as possible, so that when this happens, we don't get a bunch of people yelling and screaming, hey, listen, we wanted low density and you didn't listen to us.
Hey, Lawrence, I just wanted to jump on that as well. With respect to density, I think that one of the issues with density that people have is traffic. And obviously, we're still a very car-centric city. This is a very car-centric area. And so I think the concerns not only of passenger and personal traffic, but then also 18-wheel vehicles, establishing traffic patterns that don't interrupt the neighborhoods, particularly of Capitol View and Adair Park, as our neighborhoods are more proximal from a residential perspective to the site. And so I think traffic, the nature of traffic are a concern. And then also, with the types of jobs, obviously, whether those are noisy jobs or smelly jobs in terms of just being disruptive to the residential areas of Capitol View and Adair Park. I think those are also some of the concerns as it pertains to quote unquote density. So I don't think it's as much of an issue with having too many people here, but some of the problems or challenges that come when you bring a whole bunch of people into a space that they haven't been accustomed yet, that we haven't been accustomed to having a whole bunch of people there.
Kara here, just sorry, real quick. I also want to bring up that, there was also a big push and pull around what light industrial is. And so just to kind of reiterate, the definition from the city is that includes maker space, glass blowers, artist studios, bakeries, doggy daycares. I think just also that misconception about what light industrial is. And, that seems to be a key use for getting at some of those living wage job opportunities that we talked so much about in the last section that was focused on workforce development. So there's a tie between employment opportunities and uses, right? And so there is going to be probably that push and pull between priorities, right? We want to see good paying jobs, Those are not going to be at a restaurant necessarily. So, we're going to have to help educate and help people understand, like, we can have it all. But what does that look like?
Councilmember Shepherd.
Um,
Councilmember Shepherd.
So let me just jump in for a moment. I hear everything is interesting when y'all having this conversation. A couple things. Number one is y'all got to remember, when you're talking about density, and I think Lawrence, you really hit on some great things. When we did the sub-area 2 plan, you all remember that. I remember having several conversations in terms of sub-area 2, and there was this huge debate among different neighborhoods in terms of density. And so there were some people who wanted high density and some people who wanted low density. Now, what's interesting that in that particular area, there was a lot of whites who was pushing for high density. But one of the reasons they were pushing for high density, they were also contemplating it being one where eventually, ultimately, and the Beltline is being built out like that, at some point there will be transit also on the Beltline. So when you look at it, transit, because we're looking at this as a way of us actually getting people around the city as opposed to through MARTA or augmenting MARTA. So transit will be actually is being contemplated for the Beltline, and with that you will have another space for people to live. But I would tell you also, in the meetings we've had with the Beltline, the redevelopment plan for the sub-area 2, a lot of people talked about the fact that they didn't want to be like, if you go to East Atlanta now, Old Fourth Ward, constantly on that whole area down there, if you walk the Beltline, it is truly a concentration of over a massive amount of development being done in this high rise. There's a huge amount, and this person, me, I live in this neighborhood. I'm telling you, I'm not supporting all this huge high density. But at some point, as we begin to talk about the development of this particular site, at some point, how we can control that is through zoning. When we come to a conclusion as to what we really want, zoning will actually help to say if we want high density, low density, and hopefully come to a consensus with the community on that. The other thing I want to say was that right now, if we were to begin to map out, and maybe at some point I need to get the planning department to map out the development that is coming into the community, like cut rate box, and actually even over by the Met. People who are moving into those spots are not all just retail spaces. A lot of these architectural firms are moving from Midtown. They're moving over into the West End portion and into the Murphy Triangle area. Cut rate box is looking at bringing in companies that are not retail companies, but are companies that will actually have tenants who are coming from other parts of the city who want to come in, who are actually their costs in terms of their wages is going to be middle to high income wages. So when we're looking at the Beltline in terms of, even right now, if you look at Leon City Market and all of that, they are growing in leaps and bounds in terms of companies coming in and moving in that are not just retail, but companies who are actually literally having their employees. They like the fact that they're going to be living on the Beltline. So as we look at this, we should not look at it just in terms of specifics, but ultimately, if everything is done the way we're looking at it being done, it could be a combination of art, architectural firms, law firms, companies that are moving from other parts of the city that want to do something different and unique. So we shouldn't just lock ourselves in a box and assume that it's just going to be retail. I also want to go back, and I don't know, it was Nick or someone, or Randy, I think it was Randy to talk about. I support you 100%, Randy, in terms of that when we're looking at building out the Beltline, if you go, I was at the Beltline in Old Fort a couple of weeks ago, and I walked it. And what you have is restaurants and destination spots where people are coming from across the city to go there and eat and hang out. It's a cool place to hang out and be. For me, I'm looking for something like Randy was talking about. If I need to go to a drugstore or a small grocery store, we don't have to talk about big box. We're not talking about big box, but something that's small and cool, where right now people can walk to. One of the things I also would tell you that has been talked about for quite some time is that if you compare the Beltline on the east side compared to the Beltline in the West Side Trail, who is walking it? This should not be something that's a cool thing to do, but people in the community who are, and in particular the Black community, are not walking the Beltline as much as whites. This is a new concept. But if we build it out where there's a reason for them to come, not just a destination point for actually doing walking and biking, but I can say, I'm gonna walk down the street, I need to go to the pharmacy, but I can get on the belt line and go to a CVS. I can go to a small little store and get me some things on the belt line and then come back home and walk back home. You will have more people in this community who may be coming in as a destination spot. But we just need to be careful that when we're building the Beltline out, that we're building it out in a way that it's being really utilized by people in the community that even need it. Another case in point, then I'm going to shut up, is that, for instance, right now, and this is no point, but the farmer's market, the farm that's up on Allen Avenue now, I've had people who actually love to buy some good food, my seniors. Some of them who even maybe have food stamps are saying that the cost of the farmer market is too expensive for them. Is that even when they get an EBT food stamps and they go up there, that what they get, they can do better by going to a grocery store because the cost is so expensive. Now, again, what I'm saying is when we're talking about the farmers markets or that farm up there, people who are middle class maybe can go up there and buy. And this is no pun intended. Please forgive me if I'm insulting anybody. But they're saying, well, the white people can go up there and get it because they got the money to buy it. But if we're trying to build something where people in the community who maybe on a fixed income can go up there and they can buy some food from the farmer's market, we need to be looking at it as we build it out on this side of the city, that it's really catering to the folks who actually live here now, and a crossover of folks, not just one particular people, but a crossover of different people. And I like the fact that what Randy was saying in terms of making sure we build it out in a way that it's not just a cool place to go and have a good little restaurant and all of this and sit down and have some beer, but you can also have some retail, some pharmacies, some things that are needed by folks in the community they can just get on the belt line and walk to. So I support everything that you all are saying. Thank you.
So I saw the bullet come up about transit, and we are having this discussion about density. Let me just say that in order for MARTA, who is now the implementer of transit on the Atlanta Beltline, in order for MARTA to get federal funding to build out transit anywhere on the Atlanta Beltline, or any place in the city of Atlanta, the density has to be present. It's not that it has to be, it can be shown on the city's comprehensive development map, but you have to demonstrate to the federal government that the city is committed to providing the necessary density to support the transit. So I do understand the reticence of some folk about density, especially when their memories of density are about projects that used to exist on the west side in 2 or 3 locations. I get that. But just keep in mind that we have to show appropriate transit density. And I would say, especially here, where it is adjacent to a transit corridor. So that's just a tidbit that I am going to throw out there, and I want you to continue your conversation.
Lawrence and Nick, I know your hands are on fire.
Yes, you're certainly right about that.
Henry's on the line. Can we bring him on to address your bullet? And Henry.
Oh, Henry's on the call. I'm sorry. I took Henry's bullet.
Yeah, Henry did keep us in integrity because we said we would have a transit representative on the calls.
Okay.
And so while he's getting himself ready, Lawrence, go ahead.
Thank you. I only put that in there. I didn't think that was going to be this part of the discussion. I thought it would be coming up later on. But I don't think that anyone that's been working with the Murphy Crossing Coalition and others that we've talked to think that there will be specifically a transit piece in Murphy Crossing. But I think the request is, and that it be weighted in the RFP, is that a transit hub. This is not, creating transit is not something that ABI does. That's clearly a MARTA thing. But creating a transit hub or requiring that a transit hub be there, whether it's as in part of a parking lot that future use has set aside for Beltline rail transit, or a bus stop within there. That's the piece of transit that I think that we're talking about. Again, this is not hey, Beltline, we demand that you provide transit at Murphy Crossing. The request is that a transit hub be included in the RFP, and that the developer include someplace in the RFP where they're going to put a transit hub, and that piece be weighted so that later on, when the density is there and MARTA is able to get the funding, we can work with them so that they can get it, so that this piece can happen. Listen, I live in a very small neighborhood where our streets are so narrow, we can't even get a bus down the street. So I understand how important this is for folks who don't drive. Nick?
Absolutely.
And
Lawrence,
sorry.
go ahead.
Lawrence, I was just going to say, to your point too, us requiring them to have density does support transit, right? So to your point, that is one way that we can really push for supporting transit through the RFP.
Okay.
I just wanted to make the point to Lawrence's point, and I think Randy just addressed it as well, that the idea of a transit hub that provides alternative modes of transportation. Because the other thing is, one way you address some of what was raised about the traffic is that given your proximity to an existing highly used MARTA station, this could be an opportunity to reduce parking counts or parking requirements. So there's some creative things that we could do or could be done, as Councilmember Shepherd mentioned, through zoning to address that. But if you have some alternative modes, if we ever get back to bird scooters or whatever to get people to transit, or if people are shuttle services, we see that there's some companies that offer shuttle to MARTA. There's a lot of creative things that could be done to address the traffic issue, in terms of reducing parking requirements, but also still have a transportation hub alternative modes.
So I wanted to say that we might have shot ourselves a little bit in the foot on the community survey, although, the community survey is the best thing since sliced bread, and it's perfect in every way. The only question that we had that was about density really was sort of indirectly about density, where what we asked was about the physical, whether people wanted low rise, mid rise, or high rise. And so the way that that's phrased, it says low rise 1 to 3 stories, mid rise 4 to 9 stories, high rise 10 plus stories. Well, 10 plus stories, that got, people hate the idea of high rises more than they liked the idea of low rises. So, if we start talking 4 stories, 5 stories, that still has gotten a generally positive type of response, not as positive as a response as that's the low rise concept, but 4 to 9 stories, that's still a fairly, that's a certainly dramatic increase in the density from what we have right now. And so we can that's just something I wanted to throw out there. That density is not necessarily just height. Density is density, and it's also possible to have density without necessarily having it be huge density.
Nick, I just want to add to that, again, back to what we talked about with the zoning. A lot of times, once there's a real project to respond to, there's a way, as many of you already know, because you're active in your communities, to configure the site such that you put what could be perceived as medium or higher density in certain locations, right, i.e. closer to the MARTA rail side of things and away from the neighborhood. So there's a way to be creative in site configuration to address that.
I also wanted to mention that as wearing my NPU chair hat, that at least in my NPU, when the folks who are here start hearing about removing parking, that gets a bad reaction. People want their parking, particularly our older folks. They don't want to feel like they are going to be forced to walk anywhere, or that they'll get someplace, and won't be able to drive. So that I guarantee that will be a little bit of a selling job.
Okay.
The on-street parking has not, in my experience, been a good seller.
Okay. So this is great conversation. And I appreciate everyone's input into this conversation. You will have the ability to see this once it is posted, and we will still take comments on it. At this point, we're going to move back to Whitney and have Whitney share next steps.
Beth, this is just the perfect time because my 2-year-old son is home. So,
well, Whitney, do you want me to run through it? It's like my dog barking. I hear him in the background.
Going upstairs, so I will just be to the point. We heard what you said the last time that we were together, and what you've said really on this call is how are we addressing those people that aren't in the room? So we started by adding more time to dialogue and have this conversation. So that just gives us more opportunities to expand our reach and hopefully deepen it with your help. So we have added a few meetings for stakeholders is what we're looking at right now, but we've also added the same sort of track for community members, public meetings. And so the next time that we're together on October 20th, we'll focus on the components of the RFP that are looking at green space, project uses, and site development. So that's a little bit more of like the design and land use, zoning conversation, and arts and culture conversation. And you know what? There's a typo. Housing is supposed to be over there. So if you see on October 7th, we had housing as a thought for this meeting, but because we've had such good dialogue, we kind of anticipated that we might not have enough time to get to housing. So we moved that over to the next time we meet, that we'll get on that conversation. The 27th of October will be the conversation that we have around community engagement and equitable implementation of the project. And then the day after the election, we'll all have good news, right? And we'll be ready to talk about the scope of work.
One way or another, I will be hungover. I promise you.
Have your water by your side. We're gonna make it together. Together, we're gonna make it through. And we'll get into the evaluation criteria because some people have thrown out things like a weighted consideration tonight, and that's when you get to sort of weights and measurements is in the evaluation criteria. And then we'll have a draft, y'all. We would have gone through several iterations, and by November 9th is when we'll discuss that final draft and how that's going to feed the RFP. Hey, Adam. Okay, so, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion. Were there any thoughts about how we have added those dates, if those dates really just don't work? And, you might have to look at your calendar and see what day of the week that is. Something else that I wanted to bring up too for the public meeting and the public perspective is that the last meeting for the public would be on October 16th. So we've added a few meetings additional for the public. And what we have been able to do, and just to let y'all know, the community engagement planning team is a very tight team. It's large when you think of other departments don't have one. But when you see signs go up in your neighborhood, me and my son went and put those signs out, and we'll probably put them out. So we've put out over 50 plus signs now, 3 banners. We've had people call in by phone and participate in the community, well, the Beltline survey, by talking to me, and I'll walk them through the survey. We've had people call me and I explain to them what's going on and just sort of take their feedback down. We have had a number of neighborhood meetings or neighborhood gatherings where we have printed out hundreds of handouts, and we'll continue to do that as you put in the requests and as we see the opportunities. But expanding our community engagement dates allows us the time to just do that. So something else that we said that we would do, and that we've been talking to the council member about, is doing robocalls and reaching out to the list that the council members have. We will be sending out a mailer, a letter that has all of the new dates on them. And am I missing anything else, team, that we've been doing community engagement wise? We'll be sending out another email asking people to participate in the survey. And then there's you, the stakeholders. We need you. We know that everybody is super tasked during COVID. Jabril is just so tasked with all the work he has to do. He's screaming in the background. But we need you to forward on those links when we send them out. So specifically the community survey, to forward that on, and the Beltline questionnaire. We have a very small sample size, and we haven't bought the responses to you all because it's such a small sample size and doesn't represent all of the people that aren't on the phone. So we really rely on you to help us get that depth of engagement when it comes to community.
As you mentioned, we're really busy, so I'm willing to accept some recompense for that under a 1099.
Is anybody else in the room that wants to address it? Okay.
Oh my
And
goodness.
just make sure that you
That
have
is
our phone
funny.
numbers.
Funny.
All of our phone numbers go to our cells now, as do our emails. They have always gone to our cells. 404-477-3574 is my number. Call, text, voicemail, anytime, any day. I may not answer anytime, any day, but I will get back to you. Of course, all of the information as far as meeting presentations, agendas are up on the website. I have not been putting the agendas and presentations for the stakeholder meeting up on the website. I was a little bit unclear, but I'll go ahead and upload those. And we might take a tour of this website. When you go to beltline.org/Murphy, you'll see all of the project information, but you'll also see that I listed you all as stakeholders up on the page too, just to have transparency with everyone that's on the phone. You don't all know each other, so there's a list there, but for the public to see that as well, for the public to see when we meet, and then I'll post the presentations from our meetings. And then share your feedback. So beltline.org/Murphy feedback is the questionnaire that the Beltline has initiated that captures the demographic and income information that is really important and supplemental to the survey that has already circulated in the community. So is there any other questions, things that we missed? I see the chat is going on and staff jump in.
Whitney, I would just flag Henry's comment just a few moments ago about a transit station at Murphy Crossing.
I'm scrolling, but please jump in, Will, and highlight it for us.
Sure. Okay. Henry pointed out that there will be a transit station at Murphy Crossing as part of the Beltline Transit. Connectivity to MARTA, however, will require an infill station on the MARTA bridge. That is a more difficult undertaking that will also require MARTA buy-in.
Well, but Henry, could you clarify the station will be down in the transit corridor, correct? Not on the property.
That's correct.
That's when transit actually does come
when
along,
it
not
comes. When
part
it
of this
comes,
RFP.
yeah.
Yes, that's when transit comes through there. It will be there will be a station at Murphy Crossing. Our current concept includes such a station. Actually, our current concept includes connectivity to MARTA if we build an infill station. But all that is, much further into the future when transit comes around.
And Marta will be a part of the technical advisory committee that is formed once we have a developer selected, and the project that is selected is being reviewed by city departments that do development review. Marta will have a part of that in their as a member of the technical advisory committee.
And Beth, if I'm not mistaken also, whatever development takes place at Murphy Crossing will have a major transit connectivity as part of the development.
Yes.
Okay.
What does that mean?
That means when transit comes around, as it should, that development will fit in seamlessly into that. We will be working with this developer to make those conditions already there, so that when transit comes around, it's not that we will now start destroying what is already there. It will just come in and fit seamlessly into what is developed already.
Well, I know that everyone is getting ready to pop their popcorn and sit down and watch the debate or the basketball. Oh, no basketball game tonight. To sit down and watch the debate. And so I want to express my thanks to each of you who are continuing to participate in this process. I want to acknowledge, Lawrence, that we did receive a letter from the Murphy Coalition, and we will be providing a response to that letter directly to you to share with the coalition. And what else do I have to say? I'm going to say,
say that we we ran down a response to community participation on the selection committee.
No, we don't have a response today.
Oh, okay.
We are trying to get a response. We are trying to get a response that is collaborated with the city and Invest Atlanta. And we hope to have a response from you, hopefully by the next stakeholder meeting.
The response is we're working on it. That's what I wanted you to say, Beth.
We're working. We ran it up the flagpole and across the street and around the corner. So we are just waiting for all the responses to come back to us so that we can report out to you.
So can I ask a question?
Of course.
The coalition, is that a separate entity from the stakeholders, and that's all the neighborhoods? I'm just not understanding. So that's all the neighborhoods meeting separately to have discussion around what's coming to the table today. So that's the coalition, and that's all the various neighborhoods. Was this on the stakeholder group?
Yes.
The coalition respond. Go ahead.
Okay, so council member, I wear a couple of hats in this particular piece, and I try to keep them completely separate. I'm the chair of the Murphy Crossing Coalition, which is a group of the 8 primary neighborhoods that are represented here, and a significant number of other businesses and individuals who live in the area. We created a survey that I've been hearing so much about so that we could help to get data directly from our neighbors, from directly within our neighborhoods, because we felt we had a better reach to them than ABI might have. And the purpose was so that we could help to inform the RFP. We could give them the information that we're hearing directly from the people who live next door to us. So that's the Murphy Crossing Coalition. We've been working together since the end of August. And we've been making sure that we provide all the data that we have to ABI as well.
Thank you.
I'm not a part of the coalition and I'm in the community, so how would I have access to that, or as a stakeholder, would I be privy to
Absolutely.
requests?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Just send me your email. I'm president@adairpark.com.
Okay, how are you guys sharing this information? Is it just the coalition, or are you vetting something out and then sending it to the community to review in the community?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Timothy. It's a little more complicated than we really have time for here for this place. Would you mind if I just if I give you a call afterwards, or you call me?
Maybe tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Lawrence, I'll share the information in a follow-up email.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none.
I just want next stakeholder meeting would like to be able to dig into the RFP to ensure how it's set up and the funding is appropriated such that a lot of these requests and community input can actually be built and implemented in the final project.
Kim, we're going to go through the components. I think it's 7 of them. We're going to go through each of them, and then we're going to have the opportunity to share what we are going to call a draft, our project scope for the RFP. I see that is on here for November the 4th.
Okay.
And there will be time for the community to react to that document. And then there is a final scope meeting with the stakeholders on November the 9th, with the final community meeting where the greater community gets to see the final draft of the RFP. And that would be the document, and that would be a part of the document that would hit the street for the development community sometimes right before or right after Thanksgiving. That's the goal. That's the goal.
So, hey, Beth.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking, so October the 7th, that's us. And then the next meeting is when? October the what? The 20th? Mm-hmm. And then the next meeting is October the 27th?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I have all of these on my calendar, because I don't think I have all of those on
No,
here.
the Council Member Shepherd, these are meetings that have been added. We heard, I think it was your comment and a couple of other people at the last meeting who asked the question, why were we rushing? And so we weren't rushing. We just decided to slow down a little bit and add some more opportunities for stakeholders and the community to have input into this process. So we have stretched the process out. I think it is November 16th. Help me if I'm not quoting that date correct. As to when this process would wrap. And initially it was going to end at the end of October.
That's fine. Just send me an invite or update on those calendars so I can put them on my calendar, because I don't have them.
Okay, we will get them to you tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
All right, last chance. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, I'm going to say good night to everyone.
Night.
And again, thank you for participating.
Good night. Thanks, guys.
Good night.